Welcome, everyone, on this frigid morning. We're going to begin by singing our hymn of the month, Do You Hear? This song expresses our theme of this month of practicing resistance. It asks us if we can hear the call of life, dreams, and prayers all around us. Let us rise, embody our spirit, and sing together, Do You Hear?
Good morning. We're so glad you are here, just as you are, with all that you love and all that has brought you to this space. I'm Reverend Bret, and my pronouns are he, him, his. Joining me this morning in worship are Reverend Joyce, our assistant minister, Lindsay, our director of religious education, Tim, our choir director, our talented choir, and Barb, our worship associate this morning. Autumn, our office manager, is overseeing tech for today.
I'm Reverend Joyce, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. If you are in person, do join us for coffee hour after the service. If you're online, do like, comment, and share this worship service with others. If today is your first day worshiping with us, whether online or in person, we are thrilled that you are here. Please let us know who you are so that we can be in touch.
My name is Barb Basai, and my pronouns are she and her. We gather today on the ancestral lands of the Ho-Chunk and Potawatomi peoples, and we are in deep gratitude for the privilege of being on this sacred ground. This land, this nation, our faith, and our lives are shaped by a complex history of oppression, freedom, resistance, migration, conflict, justice, and hope. From these intertwined legacies, we learn, reflect, seek healing, offer gratitude, and strive to create a world that will reflect the choices we make for future generations. We gather today for worship, and as we gather, we join in our sacred ritual. The flaming chalice is the symbol of our faith, a beacon of truth, a fire for justice, a warmth for the soul. Cora, who is 6, will light our chalice today. She wanted to share that recently she and her family were thinking about how fireworks might look different from different places. Let us speak together the covenant of our church. Love is the spirit of this church, and reason is its guide. To dwell together in peace, to seek truth in freedom, and to serve human need. This is our covenant. Now let's sing together our chalice response song. May love shine forth through us today. May light of reason guide our way. May beauty, truth, and joy become a flame that burns in everyone.
As we settle into our time together, we share our prayers of the people, the naming of joy and sorrow, the holding in heart of those we love. We hold in our hearts all those recovering from illnesses and experiencing maladies of body or soul. May mercy and healing attend them. I know many of you have heard about the sudden and tragic death of one of our newest members, Anthony Zimopoulos. Anthony was struck by a driver who was driving under the influence. We remember Anthony as a loving father and husband. He brought his children to church regularly, and he was so patient with them. We hold in our hearts this morning his wife Ginger and their 3 young children who have just arrived today. I invite you in this space to name those aloud or in silence who you are holding in your heart this morning. I invite you now to turn and greet your neighbors in fellowship. The words of our invocation are entitled A Deeper Faith, adapted by Jeff Gollier. You have a journey to make, a sacred journey, one you eventually may come to understand as a path to follow. This will be the most important thing you've ever done. Call it the call of the Spirit. Call it the call of the great mystery. Call it a catastrophe. Call it whatever you like, but a call of some kind is hidden within the troubles. The purpose of this call may be to draw you out, maybe to draw out something hidden and wonderful within, or to awaken us from a kind of spiritual slumber. The journey ahead may not follow a straightforward path with clear-cut steps to take you through easily identifiable problems to solve. Why? Because the foundation of our lives, the core of who we believe ourselves to be, has been shaken. It is unnerving and outright scary when this happens. And at the same time, all those doubts about ourselves and questions are evidence of a great mystery at work within us. Come, let us worship together.
our story for all ages is participatory. Wow. I asked the staff if anybody had an outrageous hat, and Reverend Joyce came through. It probably looks a lot better on her, but this is the story. The story is called God's Hat. So I need some participants. I need some townspeople. All of you, come on, come on down. And I need you to kind of form a little village here. All right, just in this little circle. This is our village. Yeah, you can stand, or you can sit on the ground, or you can sit here, or you can stand. That's great. So one day, this is a story from South Africa, as told to one of my colleagues. And there was a village with a road right down the middle of it. And it was a happy village, and everyone got along. And one day, the most amazing thing happened. God came to town, and they were beautiful. And they kind of walked through the middle of town, did a little sachet, a little twirl, and walked off into the distance. That was unusual, said the townsfolk. Wouldn't that be unusual? God with an outrageous, fun, colorful hat. We sure did like that hat that they wore, said one person. It was the most beautiful red hat I've ever seen. Why, it was beautiful, another town person said, but it was a blue hat. You are quite incorrect. And another piped up and said it was red. It was obviously red. And another one said it was obviously blue. Didn't you see it? And the town started to divide. Now I need some red people over here and some blue people over here. Okay. So you're the red folks and you're the blue folks. And I need a big cheer. Red hats rule.
Red hats rule.
And blue hats rule.
Blue hats rule.
I think in this congregation we're going to get a bigger, never mind. And eventually, the town was so divided, they built a wall down the middle of the town. And they had a red hat church, and they had a blue hat church, and they stopped talking to each other. And they didn't, it was divided. It was a town divided. Oh, right? Well, one day, many years passed, many decades, well, about a decade passed, let's say. And guess what happened again? God came back to town, and they did not have a hat on that time. And they walked through the town, and the town people said, you might be able to solve a problem that we've been having for 10 years now. The hat that you had on your head, what color was it? And God thought, and they said, I think I remember coming to this place, and I do remember that hat, but it happened to be red on one side and blue on another. And then they walked off and vanished into the distance. Isn't that funny? Isn't that silly? And that's exactly what happened with the town. They started to laugh, and the children started laughing. Give me a big laugh. Laugh, everybody. Boy, don't we need a laugh in these times. And the wall, the laughter, it was so loud that the wall came tumbling down and was no more. And the town was united. Now, this is a simple story, right? Red hats, blue hats. But it's so important to remember that the smallest thing sometimes, have you ever had that in your schools? The smallest, dumbest thing kind of divides people. And what can we do to do that? We can laugh sometimes at the silliness of it, right? We can remember who we are as people of love and connection, because we are the people of love and connection. So sometimes when that happens too, we can be the people who jump in the middle and say, does it really matter what color God's hat was? And that's the story for all ages. Yay. Let us sing our youth and children to their places. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna. I do hope is subscribe to the Kairos, our weekly newsletter. Be sure to read it for announcements about upcoming events and activities. Each month, we'll be highlighting the activities of our Faith in Action teams. For this month, it is, what do you represent? Racial and economic justice. And Gloria is going to come and introduce that for us. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Gloria Perez. My pronouns are she, her, and in Spanish, ella. Along with Scott Garwick, sorry, Scott, I co-lead the Racial and Economic Justice team. Today we will be facilitating service reflections after the service today in the library. Get some coffee, have a snack, chat a bit, and listen for the chime calling us to the library. I'm going to give you an update about last week's Share the Plate. I chose the nonprofit organization Life Decisions, an organization which mentors at-risk kids ages 15 to 23 in the life skills needed to become upstanding, productive citizens. In the team's meeting after the service, we looked at the organization's website closely and decided that the organization might not share our UU values. So we decided to redirect our donation to the Liam Foundation. The team takes very seriously the trust you place in us as we ask you to share the offering plate with organizations and programs which need financial support to accomplish their goals. As we consider Share the Plate recipients, we use our UU values and an inclusive faith perspective to look at their mission, the community they serve, and the values they bring to their work. The Share the Plate program is one of our ways to share our values with the community around us. Your participation is greatly appreciated. Now, to honor Martin Luther King Day tomorrow, our Share the Plate recipient is the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. This is the Rockford NAACP. A quote from Derek Johnson, President and I have CRO, I think that's not right, of the NAACP. This is the quotation. The NAACP will continue to advocate for policies that dismantle systemic injustices and solve to improve the lives of the Black people and all Americans. The offering will now be given and greatly received.
Let us turn our hearts to a spirit of prayer and meditation. Source of compassion and mystery beyond all naming, on this day before Martin Luther King Jr. Day, we remember how children of so many nations and so many faiths have their lives impacted in so many disruptive ways. The fierce flames of anger and division and hatred are part of this. We ask for consolation for those who suffer and grieve, who wait for despots and institutions to determine their futures. Give them comfort and hope as they wait and wonder. Out of what we endure together as a human community, give us the grace to examine our relationships with those who perceive us as the enemy. Show us the way to use our power to serve the good of all for the healing of the world. May our human hearts be one with that source of all goodness. May we find our way back to love, or at least harmony. May we be lifted toward wholeness and healing as one human people, united in a struggle to remember who we are. As we spend a few moments of silence together, let us each reflect in a way that is true to our hearts. Blessed be and amen.
When the subject of resistance comes up, I can't help but think of my mom. As I've shared with some of you, my parents were born in Poland and were both affected by World War II. My dad was taken by the Nazis, but my mom remained in Poland after the war. She was a teenager when the Communist Party took over the Polish government with a lot of coercion from the USSR. During that time, the Communist Party was coercing students to join the Union of Polish Youth, or ZMP in Polish, basically a communist organization for teenagers. My mom and 3 of her friends refused. They were steeped in Catholicism, and for them, it was unthinkable to join an atheist organization. Beyond that, they saw through the lies that the Communist Party was pushing and having the students go out and tell to their neighbors. They were having the students actually spread the communist propaganda to the small villages. And that also was unacceptable to her and her friends. Now, these 4 young people had the support of their parents, and I think a few of the teachers, but the teachers were under pressure to get all of the students to join. All of the schools were being graded on what percentage of students joined the youth group, and I'm sure the teachers and administrators were trying to keep their jobs. The principal was especially forceful in applying pressure, and in the end, my mom's 3 friends caved, but not my mom. She knew it would hurt her chances of being accepted at any of the public universities with that on her record. The only place she was able to apply was at the one remaining Catholic university located in Lublin in eastern Poland. However, that university had been forced to close their law department, and my mom had wanted to study law and become a defense lawyer. So she was forced to choose a different major and rethink her entire career path. So she studied library science because of her love for literature, but she wasn't entirely thrilled with that major. Anyway, about a decade later, while she was enjoying the best years of her life as a high school teacher, actually, it was more like 15 years later, she met my dad, who was living in America, but he was living in America by then and was a U.S. citizen, but he had come to Poland to visit his sister, who was friends with my mom. So my mom and dad fell in love and got married, but he had to go back to the U.S. to go back to work, and she had to finish teaching the school year, so she stayed on in Poland for a while. Now, my mom understood that she would be able to leave Poland to join him when she was ready because he was a U.S. citizen. That was the law. If you marry a citizen of another country, you can go to join your spouse. But to her surprise, getting out of Poland wasn't going to be easy. The bureaucrat handling her papers didn't want to let her leave. He said to her, "You are our citizen and we can do with you whatever we want." But once again, she stood up for her rights. She argued back that she had a legal right to leave to join her husband, and the bureaucrat eventually backed down. I don't know the details of that. I wish I knew more. But to me, these stories exemplify what resistance looks like. They and so many others I've heard over the years of my family members resisting both communist and Nazi regimes instilled in me a belief that persistence can pay off in the face of threats. We can resist if we know our rights and can articulate them. Knowing this has helped me get through some personal crises, though I would say nothing as major as an authoritarian regime sidestepping the law to keep me in my place. So far, anyway. I like to think that I'm not a coward, I've just never been tested. But I see a need to stay in shape, to know my rights, and be aware of what's happening in the civic arena. So, with that in mind, I'd like to close with a short poem that I wrote. It's called Squats. I forgot to do my squats. For a while there, I had other cares. But I'd better get back at it. No excuses, daily habit. Because to have weak knees in times like these serves no one. Build up strength, not to bend, not to kneel, placate or appeal, not to fold, but to firmly hold a stance for justice. To be a witness, firm in resistance.
Let us rise in body or spirit for our hymn 317, We Are Not Our Own. Our first reading is Love's Conditions by Reverend Victoria Safford. And I would like to do this as a call and response. So your part is our litany. Whose are you? So when I gesture to you, you can say, whose are you? And make it a question. Whose are you? Whose are you? Father and children standing in ocean water. Who carries you in their heart, thinks of you, whether you think of them or not? Who are your people? The ones who make a force field you can almost touch. To whom are you responsible, accountable? Whose care is yours to provide? Who is within your circle of concern? When you look in the mirror in the morning, whose bones do you see? Whose blood runs in your veins? Who are those people stretching back in time beyond memory? Where did you come from? When you walk out of the room, out of your house, into the sunlight of the day, to whom in this wide world do you belong? Where is your allegiance? By whom are you called? At the end of the day, through the longest night, in the valley of the shadow of death and despair, who holds your going out and your coming in, your waking and your sleeping? Who, what holds you in the hollow of its hand? And from the Tao of Pooh, how can you get very far if you don't know who you are? How can you do what you ought if you don't know what you've got? And if you don't know which to do of all the things in front of you, then what you'll have when you are through is just a mess without a clue. Of all the best that can come true, if you know what and which and who. Thus ends the morning's readings. It isn't often that the Golden Globes offers us a juicy, sumptuous thought experiment for pondering the meaning of life. One of this year's award winners, Vince Gilligan's show Pluribus, anyone seen it? That's fine, actually. It was just this. Gilligan's also known for Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. Anyone seen that? Oh, okay. So you know that he's always been interested in the theme of what makes a person good or bad, and if any of us are completely one or the other. His latest show, Pluribus, it's on Apple TV, which got a Golden Globe for actor Rhea Seehorn, dives further and asks, what makes us human? Without going into detail, the show hints at a zombie apocalypse when an alien virus is turning humans into automatons. You can see why I turned this on. But I was sitting there watching this and I'm wondering, when is the whole feasting on brains gonna start? But there's a twist. These aren't bad zombies. They're good zombies. They haven't even lost their memories, so they're not really zombies. But in fact, they're all now connected. The world's, every single person in the world is now connected through a global consciousness where they share memories, knowledge, joys, sorrows, even skills. Love still exists, but it's shared, it's not hoarded. Babies still get made, but they're brought into the world mindfully and with care. Suddenly, empathy guides every global decision. War, hunger, and poverty end. We live in harmony with the environment and end any practice that harms another creature. We're all vegan. I had this horrible thought watching the final season, or the season finale. Is this the only way we're ever going to get to Dr. King's idea of beloved community? A vision he had of society built on love and justice and peace, where conflicts are resolved nonviolently and through true empathy, where poverty and racism and militarism are overcome. As I said, it was a horrible thought with the backdrop of these horrible times. Some days it feels like it's going to take an alien intervention to solve this world. But back to the thought experiment. There happens to be in Pluribus exactly 11 individuals who are immune to the happy virus. And some of them are comically terrible people, the worst of us. They cling to the idea that something essential is being lost in this transformation. Can we be human without nations, social distinctions, property, or even family units? They bristle at all the harmony and loss of individuality. The happiness zombies even care for these misfit left behind, seeing to their every physical and emotional need. Their every whim is catered to. I'm not going to tell you how it goes. It's a real thought experiment. If we could instantly end all global and environmental strife, would we be willing to give up our fixations on individuality? I mean, everyone would be happy. That's absolutely guaranteed. As a happiness zombie, you're even allowed to revert to your former self. But why would you, knowing the cost to all those people around you? Those people whose thoughts and stories you now share. If I could promise you, let's do this little experiment here. If I could promise you complete happiness, connection, and fulfillment, but you would no longer see yourself as an individual, would you sign up? Nobody? Would you sign up if you knew you could go back and revert once you've tasted that connection? Okay, maybe, yeah. But none of them do. The truth is, humanity collectively makes this choice every day. We have solutions to end global hunger. We have the resources to provide education and encourage purposeful lives for all. We could end war by turning our swords into plowshares. are missiles into those Buddhist temples. You ever see the shell casings, the big gigantic shell turned into gongs for meditation. A good eraser could take care of all the national boundaries. We just have to give up our ancient grudges, our greed, our delusions of separateness, which of course are wrapped up in how we understand our own humanity. Individualism, freedom, feeling special and unique, even the pursuit of individual spiritual awakening. We're all hooked. I'm hooked. In fact, Unitarian Universalism is built on a foundation of individual freedoms. It's transcendentalism at its core. So how do we get to understand ourselves collectively, not just individually, when our DNA is so entwined in this idea of the individual? For many years, I worked with a spiritual companion, an elder, who would often say, our souls are all in about third grade, Some of us are at the beginning of third grade. Some of us are about to graduate third grade to go into fourth grade. But we're all spiritual children. Our job in this lifetime, he told me many times, is to remember who we are. He usually told it to me when I was forgetting who I am. Over the years to this job, I've added a few tasks, not only to remember who we are, but also whose we are and to whom we belong. Who we are, whose we are, to whom we belong. There's a tradition amongst clergy where a senior colleague is invited to share their life's journey. These are called odysseys. We talk about our challenges and failings, those things which bring us humility. We talk about our joys and triumphs, those things which bring us courage. We talk about, what did we talk about? We talk about our calls to ministry and the strange curvy paths that those calls often take. A common theme is the lifetime task of knowing who we are and why we're here. In my first year of ministry, a colleague shared an Odyssey story that has stayed with me since. In many ways, it has guided my journey. The Odyssey was given by a Catholic priest who gave permission to tell this story. The priest shared, to the genuine shock and surprise of listeners, that he felt his life had been, in large part, a failure. He had been part of the Vatican II movement and a generation of liberal priests who hoped to effect real change in the church that he loved so much. Instead, he saw a church become more hardened to human suffering and deeply conservative. His dreams had not been realized. And yet, despite the severity of his words, that he viewed his life mostly as a failure, his demeanor seemed quite peaceful and content. Someone asked him, "How can you claim that your life was a failure and yet appear so calm and serene?" He paused and then quietly repeated the following phrase: "I know whose I am. I know whose I am." In other words, despite knowing he would never see the progressive endeavors to which he had devoted his life come to fruition, there was something larger that held his spirit, something larger that allowed him to feel a buoyancy and a lightness. I know whose I am. This was not a statement of confession or rhetoric. This was a man confident that although he could not see the outcome of his life, even though he felt such pangs of human disappointment, he knew that his life had meaning outside his immediate outcomes. He was attached to the work, but unattached to outcomes. It is what kept him moving forward despite the times, despite the setback, despite the despair and tribulation. There was something larger to which he had devoted his life, and that was enough. Whose are we? We know something of who we are. We are a people who celebrate our diversity so much that we care not so much what someone believes, but about the values we share and how we live. We know that we are loved in the sight of creation, and we affirm and promote that inherent worth and dignity of all. That's a good, who are we? But whose are we? Writes the Reverend Sarah Lammert, who shared that priestly story with me, what or who do we serve beyond our narrow self-interests? We speak of the transcendent in nature and in science, yet what is our relationship to that large universe out there? Whatever we might call it. Is it energy? Is it God? Is it love? Is it justice? Is it the people who surround us, the cloud of witnesses whose lives passed before us? Whose are we? Maybe those happiness zombies were onto something. They had given up solving the question of who I am in exchange for the deepest commitment to answering, whose am I? For many within traditional faith traditions, the answer comes in simplified form, I am God's, which is a stand-in many ways for the universe, for creation, for allness. For many in progressive faiths, this sentiment is articulated further. I am nature's, I am the earth's, I am the universe's, I am my neighbor's, I am hope's. Whose are we? To whom are we accountable? In the words of theologian Paul Tillich, what is the ground of our being? It may have been questions like these that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. pondered when, as a young pastor, he considered how to move his movement forward. Something you may not know, but at one point he and Coretta Scott King seriously considered becoming Unitarians. This story comes from now president of Starr King School of Ministry, Rosemary Bray McNatt, who was once an accomplished journalist. One day she received a call from her literary agent. Would she be willing to be considered as a co-writer of Coretta Scott King's autobiography? The honor eventually went to another writer, but McNatt was able to interview Coretta Scott King to discuss the project. What McNatt learned in that interview shocked her with surprise, delight, and ultimately disappointment. I went to Unitarian churches for years, even before I met Martin, Coretta King told McNatt. And Martin and I went to Unitarian churches when we were in Boston. She said she and Dr. King gave a lot of thought to becoming Unitarians, but they believed they could never build a mass movement of Black people if they were Unitarian. It was not just race that factored in their decision. It was also, McNatt notes, the sunny optimism of liberal faith, an optimism frankly untested in the heat of battle for liberty and dignity for African Americans. As King's ministry grew, he drifted further and further from the optimism of liberal religion. King wrote in his essay, Pilgrimage to Nonviolence, that he would always cherish the devotion of liberal religion to the search for truth and its refusal to abandon the best light of reason. However, as King observed the tragedies of history and humanity's shameful inclination to choose the low road, he came to feel that liberalism is too sentimental regarding human nature, causing it to overlook the fact that reason is darkened by sin. Reason, King wrote, devoid of the purifying power of faith, can never free itself from distortions and rationalizations. Tom Nicholson wrote in the UU World that King would not have been able to do what had to be done if he'd had to soften his message to accommodate the sensitivities of our faith. In his article, How Big Is Your God?, he argues that Martin Luther King Jr. served as troublesome, dangerous, and demanding God, who both breaks down divisions and never lets us sit down in the face of injustice. King's God, argues Mickelson, kept growing throughout his life. As that happened, he writes, King's supporters began to abandon him. Their God was not as big as his God, not as inclusive, not as troublesome, not as dangerous, not as demanding. People thought King had gotten off track, could see that he was overtired and emotionally drained. But he was on track, Mickelson concludes. He was a theologian as well as a civil rights leader. He knew the size of his God. He understood where his God was leading him, and he was not going anywhere else. King knew whose he was, what it was that owned his heart, even his mind, even as his mind considered other possibilities. It was large and irresistible. How many of us have felt that pull, not of our minds only, not even of our hearts, but with all our being? In many ways, my opinion is that that decision to move through Unitarian, well, at the time, Unitarianism, was a question of who he was versus whose he was. In August of 1959, Joan Thatcher, publicity director of the American Baptist Convention, asked King to write about his call to ministry, or the tug many clergy feel as they contemplate seminary. This call includes an awareness that we are not only a part of something larger than ourselves, but we belong to it. And this it is awesome. Not cool awesome, but shaking your boots awesome because this huge, good, loving, universal thing has got you in its teeth. In her request, Thatcher noted, apparently many of our young people still feel that unless they see a burning bush or a blinding light on the road to Damascus, they haven't been called. King wrote back, my call to ministry was neither dramatic nor spectacular, he wrote. It came neither by some miraculous vision nor by some blinding light experience on the road of life. Moreover, it did not come as a sudden realization. Rather, it was a response to the inner urge that gradually came upon me. This urge just expressed itself in a desire to serve God and humanity, and the feeling that my talent and my commitment could best be expressed through the ministry. At first, I planned to be a physician, and I turned my attention in the direction of law. But as I passed through the preparation stages of these two professions, I still felt within that undying urge to serve God and humanity through ministry. And the more I tried to escape, the more frustrated I became. Every minister has their call story, but I also believe that every person has one too. Something that calls you into a relationship of belonging. What brings you to this place of community and aspiration? What brings you here? Is it a longing for connection to others who share this journey with you? Is it a longing to understand the fragile interconnections between us and the mysteries of the universe, the big questions of life? Is it a longing for wholeness that you haven't found elsewhere and for which you are still hungry? It is something that words fail and will always fail to articulate. How are you called to a life that is more whole and more in union with creation? What are your ministries? What love resides in your heart that is worthy of your call? I often feel like a difference between the so-called ministerial call and the so-called lay call is that ministers, we wind up often being generalists, having to organize and do social work and do counseling, and write sermons. Whereas I've noticed in a lot of lay calls, if I even dare make that distinction, is that they're specialists. Lay calls are often specialized. I see people just completely consumed by that one thing that makes their hearts sing, as Howard Thurman said, that intersection between the world's great need and what your heart desires. Never discount that you have a call to ministry. Do you hear? Do you hear? To conclude, to serve others, we must know ourselves, why we arrive, to whom we know we are accountable, to whom we belong. It is there we find whose we are, that which holds us in our grip of longing for wholeness and connection. For some, this might be found in a hut in a silent desert. For others, maybe serving sandwiches to the homeless. For others, maybe looking at the examples of great people like Dr. King and finding models for a truly virtuous life. I think for a lot of us, it's just keeping to the path, step after step. Let's walk together in the hush of these times, listening for what is next as we rise in body and spirit for our closing hymn. Our real journey in life is a matter of growth, deepening, and of an ever greater surrender to the creative action of love and grace in our hearts. Never was it more necessary for us to respond to that action. May we all do so, and may it be well. And now, while Barb extinguishes our chalice, but I was wondering, but not the light of truth. We did that the other day. Huh? Or the fire of commitment which we carry until we are together again. I invite you to join hands for our closing blessing. If touch is uncomfortable or private for you, please just keep your hands where they are, trusting that others will respect your choice. Now let us sing our closing blessing.